Well, hello, and welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So, as you can clearly see, this is the 4th of July edition. This blog should be coming out the day before the 4th of July, our nation's birthday, and quite a timely opportunity. This blog I purposefully wrote on Friday of last week. I wanted to wait to see how the debates were going to shake out, and by now you are all painfully aware of what happened in the debates. We talk about that, and I'll be talking about that a little bit in this little video as well. There's also two major Supreme Court cases that came out last week. I could not, and I apologize for this, I normally like to keep the blogs at about a page and a half. I just simply couldn't do it. I mean, I had to talk about the debate. That was obvious. I also had to talk about the case of Looper, which deals with Chevron deference, and finally Fisher, which deals with the January 6 trespassers. The last one just happened today, as a matter of fact. This morning, as I was coming into work, Supreme Court put out their final decision. This one has to deal with presidential immunity, and I'm sure you're well aware of how that affects Donald Trump. It was clearly a victory for the Trump ticket. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to be honest with you. We all sort of knew. We did, and we're fooling ourselves if we didn't. We all knew that President Biden was in an advanced state of cognitive decline. Many of us didn't realize how bad it actually was, but it proved itself to be readily apparent during the debate. And when you have the New York Times and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution calling for President Biden to step aside in the next presidential race, that says something. It also is incredibly troubling because we are essentially making the argument that he does not have the cognitive ability to be the president of the United States, and yet at this moment, and at least up until the presidential turn, he's still the president of the United States. So we are sort of admitting that we have an individual that does not have the cognitive ability to run the country. And yet that begs the question, who is running the country? And that's where an interesting sort of behind-the-scenes debate is taking place. We've all known for quite some time that the shadow presidency, the ones calling the shots, so to speak, were President Obama and Michelle Obama. To the extent that they essentially populated the Biden cabinet with Obama appointees, and they effectively run the White House from their private residence in Washington, D.C. They've also come out and said, oh, no, we have to continue to support Joe Biden. Of course that's going to be the case. He is, in fact, their puppet. Now, many on the Democratic Party are pushing against this, which interestingly puts them at odds with President Obama. So there's a political infighting that's taking place. It's of an utter magnitude. The debate itself was a painful experience to watch. In my opinion, it was essentially elder abuse. There's no other real way of getting around that. But I also needed to talk about these two other Supreme Court cases. Chevron deference, where that has been officially overturned. Now the legislature, the United States Congress, is in fact the one that has to do the heavy lifting when it comes to the development of regulations. This is going to have a massive impact on the scope of the executive branch of government. In our personal world, Second Amendment advocacy, this is going to have a direct effect on the powers of the ATF, but it's broader than that. I mean, it affects the IRS, the SEC, the EPA, any federal regulatory agency. And then the last one on the January 6th matter. This went surprisingly well, especially for the defendants that are currently incarcerated as a result of being prosecuted under what was effectively an economics crime act. And essentially, the Supreme Court said that is absolutely beyond the pale. You can't do that. This is going to result in about 200 convictions being overturned. These are people that are in prison. Okay. Many of us would call them political prisoners. And as we are starting to see, or at least probably a better way of saying it, as the public in general now is beginning to see, as we peer behind the curtain, the executive branch is rotten. I mean, there's no question about that. In any event, I do encourage you to read the blog. I apologize that it's a little long this time, but interesting times that we live in, no? In any event, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.